Marcus Turner grabbed the man's wrist and twisted until he heard the knife hit the pavement. 8 seconds. That's all it took. A welder from Gary, Indiana. No training, no badge, no weapon. Just put an armed robber face down on a frozen Chicago sidewalk, with one knee on his back, while his 9-year-old daughter watched from behind a motel lobby door. He didn't know the woman bleeding on the ground was a retired Navy colonel. He didn't know she ran a $200 million company. He didn't know that in 3 minutes she'd look up at him and say one word that would change his life forever. "Sir?" But what happened next, nobody saw coming. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. And if you haven't already, subscribe. You don't want to miss where this goes. Marcus Turner's hands were shaking, but not from the cold. He was standing in a CVS pharmacy on Rush Street, staring at the total on the register screen. $214.67. Zoe's heart medication, the post-surgery antibiotics, and the anti-inflammatory drops her cardiologist had added to the regimen after Tuesday's checkup. He had $241 in his checking account. That left $26.33 for the rest of the trip. Just a room with a heater that rattled like it was dying, and walls thin enough to hear the couple next door arguing about money. Which was ironic, because money was the only thing Marcus thought about anymore. He'd been saving for 5 months for this trip. Double shifts at Kowalski & Son Structural Welding. Saturdays, Sundays, every overtime hour he could grab. Zoe's follow-up appointment at Lurie Children's Hospital wasn't optional. Her cardiologist had been clear about that. 2 years after her second open-heart surgery, they needed imaging, blood work, the full workup. The hospital didn't care that Marcus's insurance had a $4,000 deductible. The hotel didn't care that he'd had to choose between new winter boots for Zoe and the gas money to drive 3 hours north. The pharmacy sure as hell didn't care that $214.67 was the difference between making it home and running on fumes. But Marcus cared. That was the thing about Marcus Turner that people who knew him understood, and people who didn't never would. He cared about everything. Every detail. Every dollar. Every promise he made to his daughter. He walked fast, head down against the wind, the pharmacy bag tucked inside his coat to keep the medication from freezing. 6 blocks to the motel. He'd left Zoe with the front desk clerk, a young woman named Dana, who'd taken a liking to Zoe over the 2 days they'd been staying there. "Your daughter's a firecracker," Dana had said that morning. "Told me all about the solar system. Did you know Saturn's rings are mostly ice?" "She tells me every day," Marcus had said, and meant it. Zoe was 9 years old, and she knew more about the planets than Marcus knew about anything except welding and being her father. She read books the way other kids watch TV, constantly, obsessively, with a focus that made Marcus wonder where she got it from. Not from him. He'd barely finished high school. Not from her mother, Keisha, who'd walked out when Zoe was 2 and hadn't looked back. Keisha. He didn't think about her much anymore. He used to lie awake wondering what he'd done wrong, what he could have been to make her stay. But somewhere around year 3 of solo parenting, the wondering stopped. Not because he'd found peace with it, because he didn't have time. When your daughter has a congenital heart defect and you're the only person standing between her and the world, you don't waste energy on people who chose to leave. Marcus turned onto Michigan Avenue and picked up his pace. 4 blocks now. He could see the motel sign from here, the flickering L in Lakeview that had been out since they'd arrived. That's when Zoe called him. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with cold fingers. "Daddy, when are you coming back?" 4 blocks away, baby girl. 5 minutes. "Dana let me have a cookie from the lobby." "That was nice of her. Did you say thank you? Twice. Daddy? Yeah? Can we get hot chocolate? There's a place across the street. Dana showed me from the window. It has a big sign with a cup on it. Marcus looked at the pharmacy bag. $26.33 left. Hot chocolate was probably $5, $6 in this part of Chicago. Everything in this city costs more than it should. Tomorrow morning, Zoe, I promise. First thing. Okay. A pause. Daddy? Yeah, baby? My chest doesn't hurt today. Marcus stopped walking. Right there on Michigan Avenue, with the wind trying to knock him sideways, he stopped. Because that sentence, "My chest doesn't hurt today," was the best thing he'd heard in months. Zoe's recovery had been rough. The surgery had fixed the valve, but the healing was slow, and there were days when she'd press her hand to her sternum and look at him with eyes that no 9-year-old should have. Eyes that said, "I know this is serious, even if you won't tell me how serious." That's great, Princess. That's really great. I'll be there in a few minutes, okay? Okay. Love you. Love you more. He hung up and started walking again, faster now, not because of the cold, but because his daughter was 4 blocks away and her chest didn't hurt. And tomorrow morning he was going to buy her the biggest hot chocolate that $6 could get in downtown Chicago. 3 blocks. 2. He was passing the Peninsula Hotel when he heard it. A woman's voice. Sharp. Not a scream exactly. More like a sound that gets ripped out of you when something goes wrong, fast. A gasp that turned into a cry, that turned into the kind of noise that makes every head on a street turn. Marcus turned. In front of the Peninsula's entrance, under the bright awning lights, a man in a black hoodie had a woman by the arm. He was pulling at her briefcase. She was pulling back. And for a half second, Marcus thought it might be a misunderstanding. A couple arguing, maybe, or someone grabbing the wrong bag. Then the man slammed the woman's head into the stone pillar next to the hotel's revolving door. The sound was unmistakable. Skull against stone. The woman went down to one knee, still holding the briefcase, and the man hit her again, this time with his fist across the face, and grabbed the briefcase with both hands. Marcus's body went cold in a way that had nothing to do with February. He had Zoe waiting for him. He had $26.33 to his name. He had no weapon, no backup, no reason to get involved in something that could get him stabbed or shot or arrested in a city where he was nobody. But the woman was on the ground now, blood on her forehead, her hand up, trying to protect her face. And the man was kicking her, actually kicking her, while he yanked the briefcase free. There were other people on the street. Marcus saw them. A couple across the avenue stopped, watching, the man already pulling out his phone. To call 911 or to record, Marcus couldn't tell. A doorman at the Peninsula, frozen in the entrance, doing nothing. A group of young people walking the other direction, fast, pretending they hadn't seen. Everyone saw. Nobody moved. Marcus moved. Not toward the woman, toward the motel. He covered the distance in seconds, burst through the lobby door. Zoe was sitting in a chair near the front desk, her book open on her lap. "Daddy, you're—" "Zoe." He knelt in front of her, his hands on her shoulders, his voice calm, in a way that cost him everything. "Listen to me very carefully. I need you to stay right here. Tell Dana to call 911. There's someone outside who needs help. Do not come outside. Do you understand me?" Zoe's eyes went wide. She'd seen something in his face she'd never seen before. "Daddy, what's—" "Do you understand me, Zoe?" "Yes." "Say it back." "Stay here. Tell Dana to call 911. Don't go outside." "Good girl. I love you." Daddy, please be careful. Always am. He stood up. He looked at Dana behind the desk. Call 911. Robbery in front of the peninsula. She's hurt. Dana was already reaching for the phone. Marcus went back outside. The man had the briefcase now. He was moving fast, heading south on Michigan, away from the hotel. The woman was on the ground, not moving much, her hand pressed to her head, blood running through her fingers. Marcus didn't run. He walked. Fast, purposeful, closing the distance with long strides that covered ground without announcing themselves. 12 years of carrying steel beams and climbing scaffolds had given him a body that was built for work, not show. Thick shoulders, heavy arms, the kind of frame that didn't look fast until it was. The man in the hoodie didn't hear him coming, not until Marcus was 3 steps behind him. Drop the briefcase. The man spun. He was younger than Marcus expected. Mid-20s, lean, wired on adrenaline or something chemical. His eyes went up to Marcus's face, then down his body, calculating. Back off, man. This ain't your business. I said, drop it. You don't want this. The man's right hand went to his jacket pocket. Trust me, you don't want this. Marcus saw the knife come out. A folding blade, maybe 4 inches. The kind you could buy at any gas station. The man held it low, the way people hold knives when they've used them before. Not up high like in the movies, but down near the hip, ready to thrust. Everything in Marcus's brain said walk away. He had a daughter. He had a life that depended on him being alive. He had every reason in the world to let this man run and wait for the police. But behind him, on the frozen sidewalk, a woman was bleeding. And Marcus Turner was not the kind of man who walked away from that. He'd never been trained to fight, not formally, no military service. He'd wanted to enlist at 18, but Keisha was pregnant, and the recruiter said maybe next year, and then next year never came. No martial arts classes, just the south side of Chicago, where he'd grown up, where you learned to read a threat and handle yourself, or you didn't make it to adulthood. The man lunged. Marcus caught his wrist. Not gracefully. There was nothing graceful about it. He caught the wrist and twisted, hard, the way you'd torque a wrench on a rusted bolt, and the man's grip broke. The knife hit the pavement with a sound like a bell. The man swung with his left hand. Marcus took the punch on his shoulder, barely felt it, and drove forward, all 210 pounds of him, slamming the man backward. They hit the ground together, but Marcus was on top, and 12 years of physical labor meant he had the kind of functional strength that gym muscles couldn't replicate. He put the man face down on the sidewalk, one knee on his spine, both hands controlling the man's wrists. Stop moving. Get off me! Get off! I said stop moving. Police are coming. The man thrashed for maybe 5 seconds. Then he felt the weight on his back. The absolute, immovable weight of a man who spent his days lifting things that didn't want to be lifted. And he went still. Marcus looked up. The briefcase was on the sidewalk 3 feet away. The knife was further back near the curb. And the woman was sitting up now, staring at him from 20 yards away with an expression he couldn't read. Blood was running down the left side of her face. Her coat was torn at the shoulder. But her eyes were clear, sharp, evaluating. Are you okay? Marcus called to her. Ma'am, are you hurt? She didn't answer right away. She just looked at him. This man she'd never met. This stranger who'd come out of nowhere and done what no one else on the street had been willing to do. Then she said one word. Sir. Not a question, not a greeting, an acknowledgement. The way you'd address someone who'd earned something in a single moment that most people never earn in a lifetime. Marcus didn't know what to do with that word. He just kept his knee on the man's back and waited for the sirens. They came fast, 3 squad cars, lights cutting through the dark, officers moving with purpose. Marcus raised his hands when they approached. He knew how this worked. Black man on top of someone on a city sidewalk at night. He knew exactly how this could go wrong. "I'm the one who called it in," he said clearly. "My daughter called 911 from the motel down the block. This man attacked that woman. There's a knife on the ground near the curb." The officers were professional. They secured the suspect, checked the knife, and one of them, a veteran cop with gray at his temples, looked at Marcus with something that might have been respect. "You did this by yourself?" "Yes, sir." "He had a knife?" "Yes, sir." The cop looked at the suspect, then back at Marcus. "You military?" "No, sir. Construction. Welder." The cop almost smiled. "Hell of a welder." Paramedics arrived for the woman. She was sitting on the steps of the peninsula now, an EMT pressing gauze to her forehead. She hadn't taken her eyes off Marcus. An officer approached him. "Sir, we'll need a full statement. Can you come to the station?" "My daughter's at the motel. She's 9. "Bring her along. This shouldn't take too long." Marcus walked to the motel. When he came through the door, Zoe launched herself out of the chair and into his arms so hard it almost knocked him back. "Daddy! Daddy, are you okay? Dana called the police and I heard the sirens and I was so scared." "I'm okay, baby. I'm right here." "Your hands are shaking." He looked down. She was right. His hands were trembling now, the adrenaline draining out of him, leaving behind the fear he hadn't allowed himself to feel during those 8 seconds. "I'm okay," he said again, "but we have to go to the police station for a little while. They need to talk to me about what happened." "Did you help the lady?" "I did." "Is she okay?" "She's going to be okay." Zoe pulled back and looked up at him. Her eyes, Keisha's eyes, brown and deep and too old for 9, searched his face. "You're a good person, Daddy." Marcus picked her up, even though she was getting too big for it, and held her tight. At the police station, Zoe sat in the lobby with a female officer named Martinez, who produced hot chocolate and a coloring book from somewhere. Marcus sat across a desk from Detective Williams, a tired-looking man in his 50s, who took the statement with the patience of someone who'd heard 1,000 of them. "Walk me through it again. You were coming from the pharmacy?" "Yes, sir. CVS on Rush, picking up my daughter's medication." "And you heard the victim scream?" "I heard a sound, then I saw the suspect attacking her in front of the peninsula." "And you chose to intervene?" "My daughter was with me. I got her to safety first. Then I went back." Williams looked at him. "Most people don't go back." "Most people don't have to explain to their kid why they didn't." Williams wrote that down. Then he leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Turner, the woman you helped tonight, do you know who she is?" "No, sir. She told the paramedics her name was Catherine something. I didn't catch the last name." "Catherine Ashford." "Okay." "That name mean anything to you?" "No, sir." Williams studied him for a long moment. "She asked to speak with you, gave my officer her personal number, said she'd like to call you tonight, if you're willing." "She wants to call me?" "She was very specific about it. Said to tell you she'd consider it a personal favor." Marcus didn't understand why a woman he'd helped on the street would use words like personal favor, but he'd been raised to be decent, and if the woman wanted to say thank you, he wasn't going to make it difficult. "Sure, she can call." They finished the statement at 10:47 p.m. Officer Martinez had gotten Zoe a second hot chocolate and let her sit at a real police desk, which Zoe thought was the greatest thing that had ever happened. "Daddy, Officer Martinez has a taser," Zoe announced as they walked to the car. "That's her job, baby." "Can I have one?" "Absolutely not." "What about when I'm 10? "Still no." 11? "Get in the car, Zoe." They drove back to the motel in silence. Marcus's hands had stopped shaking, but his mind hadn't stopped running. The woman's face, the blood on her forehead, the way she'd said, "Sir," all of it circling in his head like water that wouldn't go down a drain. He got Zoe into bed. She was asleep in 3 minutes, her hand resting on her chest the way she always did, an unconscious habit from years of her heart being the center of everything. The organ that had almost killed her twice and was now, finally, healing. Marcus sat by the window. The motel room was cold. The heater was doing its dying rattle thing. Outside, Michigan Avenue was still alive with headlights and distant voices. A city that never stopped moving, even when you were too tired to move with it. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. "Mr. Turner?" A man's voice. "This is Officer Reyes, 2nd District. I have someone here who'd like to speak with you, if you have a moment." "Okay." Silence. Then the click of a phone being handed over. "Mr. Turner." A woman's voice, calm, controlled, but underneath it something raw, the kind of emotion that someone used to being in control doesn't let surface easily. "This is Catherine Ashford. I'm the woman you helped tonight." "Yes, ma'am. How are you feeling? Your head?" "6 stitches. I'll live. Because of you." A pause. "Mr. Turner, I need to ask you something, and I apologize if this is forward. May I meet you tomorrow morning? There's a cafe near your hotel. I'd like to properly thank you." "Ma'am, you don't need to do that. I'm glad you're okay. That's enough." "Please." Her voice shifted. Not pleading. She wasn't a woman who pleaded. But insistent in a way that carried weight. "It would mean a great deal to me. 10 o'clock. The cafe is called Emma's Place, on the corner of Michigan and Oak. Bring your daughter. Breakfast is on me." Marcus looked at Zoe sleeping. Tomorrow was their last day. Check out at noon, then the 3-hour drive back to Gary. Back to the job site. Back to the life. 10 o'clock works, ma'am." "Thank you, Mr. Turner." Another pause. Longer this time. "And Mr. Turner, what you did tonight, most people wouldn't have done. I need you to know that I understand exactly what it cost you to make that choice." The line went dead. Marcus set the phone on the nightstand and stared at it. He didn't know what she meant by that. He didn't know how she knew where his motel was, though the police report had his address. He didn't know why a woman with 6 stitches in her head was making phone calls at 11 o'clock at night to arrange breakfast with a stranger. He didn't know any of it. But lying awake in that cold motel room, listening to his daughter breathe, Marcus Turner had the strangest feeling that something had just shifted. Not in the world. In him. Like a steel beam settling into place after being lifted. A small sound, barely noticeable. But once it was there, everything above it could finally hold weight. He closed his eyes. He didn't sleep. The alarm on Marcus's phone went off at 7 a.m., but he was already awake. He'd been awake since 5:30, lying on his back in the dark, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like the state of Texas. His body was sore in places he hadn't expected. His right shoulder from where the man had swung at him, his knee from pinning the guy to the sidewalk, and a dull ache in his lower back that had nothing to do with last night and everything to do with 12 years of bending over weld joints. Zoe was still sleeping, her hand on her chest, her mouth slightly open. The sound of her breathing, steady, even, alive, was the only sound in the room besides the dying heater. Marcus got up quietly, showered in water that couldn't decide if it wanted to be warm or cold, and put on the only clean clothes he had left. Jeans, a flannel shirt, his work boots, because they were the only shoes he'd brought. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. A black man with tired eyes and calloused hands, about to have breakfast at a cafe he couldn't afford with a woman he didn't know. "Daddy?" Zoe's voice from the bed. "Right here, baby." "What time is it?" 7:30. "We're going to breakfast this morning, remember? The lady from last night wants to say thank you." Zoe sat up, rubbing her eyes. "The lady you helped?" "That's the one." "Is she okay?" "She got some stitches, but she's fine." "Do I have to dress up?" Marcus almost laughed. "Wear whatever you want, princess." They left the motel at 9:40. The wind had died overnight, but the cold hadn't. Marcus held Zoe's hand as they walked the 3 blocks to Emma's place, on the corner of Michigan and Oak. It was nicer than he'd expected. Polished wood, big windows, the kind of cafe where a single cup of coffee probably cost more than the breakfast he usually made Zoe at home. Scrambled eggs, toast, and whatever fruit was on sale. Catherine Ashford was already seated at a corner table. She stood when they walked in, and Marcus got his first real look at her in daylight. She was mid to late 40s, tall, with short, silver-streaked hair and the posture of someone who'd spent decades in uniform. The bandage on her forehead was smaller than he'd expected. Neat, precise, like even her injuries were well organized. She wore a dark blazer over a white blouse, and she looked at Marcus the way a foreman looks at a blueprint, like she was measuring something. "Mr. Turner, thank you for coming." She extended her hand. Her grip was firm. "And this must be Zoe." Catherine knelt slightly to meet Zoe's eyes. "Zoe, your father is a very brave man. I'm grateful to him, and I'm grateful to you for calling for help last night." Zoe looked at her father, then back at Catherine. "You have stitches?" "I do, 6 of them." "I've had stitches too, from my surgeries." "Mine were bigger, though." Catherine smiled. Not a polite smile, a real one. "I bet they were. You want to sit down and tell me about it?" They sat. Catherine ordered for the table without making a production of it. Pancakes for Zoe, eggs and coffee for Marcus, a fruit plate she pushed toward the center. Zoe talked about her heart surgeries with the matter-of-fact tone of a child who'd spent so much time in hospitals that medical terminology was just another language she spoke. "They fixed my mitral valve," Zoe explained, holding up 2 fingers. "Twice. The first time didn't work right, so they had to go back in. But Dr. Okonkwo says my heart is doing really good now." "Dr. Okonkwo at Lurie?" Catherine asked. "You know her?" "I know of her. She's one of the best pediatric cardiac surgeons in the country. Your father chose well." Marcus shifted in his seat. He hadn't chosen Dr. Okonkwo. She'd been assigned through the hospital's charity care program. But he didn't correct Catherine. Some things didn't need to be said. They ate. Catherine asked Zoe about school, about her favorite subjects, science and art, in that order. About whether she liked living in Gary. Zoe was honest the way only kids can be. "It's okay. My school is kind of old. The library doesn't have a lot of books. But Daddy takes me to the public library on Saturdays, so it's fine." "Every Saturday?" "Unless he's working. Sometimes he works Saturdays." "And Sundays?" "Sometimes Sundays, too." Catherine glanced at Marcus. He held her gaze, but said nothing. After breakfast, Catherine leaned toward Zoe with a conspiratorial smile. "Zoe, I noticed there's a children's reading corner in the back of this cafe. I saw some books about space back there. Would you like to explore while I talk to your dad for a few minutes?" Zoe's eyes lit up. "Space books? I thought I saw one about Saturn." Zoe was already out of her chair. She looked at Marcus. "Go ahead," he said. "Stay where I can see you." Once Zoe was settled in the reading corner, happily pulling a book about the solar system off a shelf, Catherine turned back to Marcus. The warmth was still there, but something else came through now, something sharper. "Marcus, may I call you Marcus?" "Yes, ma'am." Then I need you to call me Catherine, because what I'm about to tell you is not a ma'am and sir conversation. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. She placed it on the table between them and slid it across. Marcus picked it up. He read it twice because the first time didn't make sense. Catherine Ashford, Colonel, retired, United States Navy, Chief Executive Officer, Ashford Global Security. He set the card down. You're military. 22 years, Naval Intelligence, then Special Operations Support. Retired 3 years ago at the rank of Colonel. And now you run a security company. My father started it. I took over when he passed. We provide executive protection, crisis response, facility security, and tactical training. Our clients include Fortune 500 companies, foreign dignitaries, and 3 branches of the federal government. Marcus looked at the card again, then at Catherine. I don't understand why you're telling me this. Because last night, you saved my life. And I don't say that casually. I've been in situations where my life was at risk before. Overseas, in uniform, under conditions most people can't imagine. Last night, on a street in Chicago, a man with a knife had me on the ground, and the only person who moved was a man I'd never met. Anybody would have. No. Catherine's voice was quiet, but absolute. They wouldn't have. I counted, Marcus. There were 9 people on that street who saw what was happening. 9. You were the only one who moved. And you had more reason than any of them to keep walking. What do you mean? You had your daughter with you, a 9-year-old girl with a heart condition. You had every justification in the world to protect her and only her. Instead, you got her to safety and came back. Do you understand how rare that is? Marcus didn't answer. He looked at Zoe in the reading corner, cross-legged on the floor, already deep into the Saturn book. After last night, Catherine continued, I made some calls. I have contacts in law enforcement and in military intelligence. Old habits. When someone saves your life, you want to know who they are. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. You looked into me. I did, and I'll be honest with you about what I found, because you deserve honesty. Catherine folded her hands on the table. Marcus Turner, 37, single father. Welder at Kowalski & Sons in Gary, Indiana. 12 years at the same company. Never missed a day. Your foreman, a man named Jim Kowalski, told my people you're the most reliable worker he's ever had. Said you could run the entire crew if you had the credentials. Marcus said nothing. You scored in the 98th percentile on your high school aptitude tests. You were accepted to Purdue on a partial scholarship. But you didn't go because your girlfriend was pregnant, and you chose to work instead. She wasn't my girlfriend by then. She was my daughter's mother. That's different. It is different. And that distinction tells me everything I need to know about how you think. Catherine leaned forward. Keisha left when Zoe was 2. You've raised your daughter alone for 7 years. You've never missed a medical appointment, never missed a parent-teacher conference. You drive 3 hours each way to bring her to the best cardiac specialist in the Midwest, instead of settling for whoever's closest. How do you know all this? Because finding out who people really are is literally what my company does. Marcus pushed back from the table slightly. Not in anger, in discomfort. He wasn't used to being seen this clearly. His life was small and private, and he kept it that way on purpose. Having a stranger lay it out like a case file made him feel exposed in a way that the cold last night hadn't. Ms. Ashford, Catherine, I appreciate what you're doing. If this is about a reward, I don't need one. I didn't help you for money. I know you didn't. That's exactly the point. Catherine reached into her bag again and pulled out a folder. She set it on the table. Marcus, I'm not offering you a reward. I'm offering you a job." The cafe noise seemed to drop away. Marcus heard Zoe turn a page in the reading corner. He heard his own heartbeat. A job. Ashford Global Security runs a 12-week tactical training program for new operatives. Executive protection, crisis response, threat assessment, physical conditioning. It's intensive. It's demanding. And the people who complete it go on to protect some of the most important people in the world.
I'm a welder. You're a man who disarmed an armed attacker in under 10 seconds. You maintained calm. You controlled the situation without excessive force. You prioritized the safety of a child while still protecting a stranger. Catherine tapped the folder. I have 200 employees. 60% have military backgrounds, special forces, intelligence, federal law enforcement. And I'm telling you right now, half of them would not have done what you did last night. They have training. I just reacted. Reacting correctly under pressure is the single most important skill in protection work. We can teach techniques. We can teach protocols. We cannot teach the instinct to move toward danger when everyone else moves away. That's either in you or it isn't. It's in you. Marcus stared at the folder. His hands were on the table, and he noticed Catherine looking at them. The scars, the calluses, the burn mark on his left thumb from a welding torch 3 years ago. What exactly are you offering?
12 weeks of training at our facility in Virginia. Full salary during training, $80,000 a year. After certification, you'd transfer to our Chicago office as a Level 3 operative. Starting salary of $130,000. Full benefits, health insurance, dental, and an education fund for Zoe. Marcus heard the numbers, but they didn't register. They were too large. They existed in a category of money he'd never occupied. His salary at Kowalski's was $41,000 a year before taxes. He'd been making roughly that same amount, give or take, for a decade. That's more than 3 times what I make. It's what the position pays. I'm not inflating it for you. Every Level 3 operative at Ashford makes that salary. You'd be earning the same as everyone else. What about Zoe? I can't leave her for 12 weeks. She has doctors in Illinois. She has school. I've thought about that. Your sister Denise lives in Gary, correct? Marcus blinked. You know about Denise? Denise Turner, 39, registered nurse at Methodist Hospital, unmarried, no children. Lives 4 blocks from your apartment. You are thorough. I'm a former intelligence officer. Thorough is the minimum. Catherine softened slightly. I'm not asking you to abandon your daughter. 12 weeks in Virginia, with Denise caring for Zoe. You'd fly home on weekends. We cover travel. After certification, you transfer to Chicago. Better schools, better hospitals, better everything. You're asking me to uproot my daughter's life. I'm asking you to give her a better one. That landed. Marcus felt it hit somewhere deep, in the place where every worry about Zoe lived. The deductibles he couldn't cover. The school with no books. The apartment with a draft under the door that he'd stuffed with towels every winter since she was 4. Why? Marcus asked. Tell me the real reason.
Not the speech about instincts and training. The real reason you're sitting here offering a construction worker a 6-figure job. Catherine was quiet for a moment. She looked toward the reading corner, where Zoe was now showing another child her Saturn book, explaining something with animated hands. Because 22 years ago, I was a junior officer, and I made a decision under fire that saved 3 members of my team. My commanding officer, a man named Admiral James Rourke, pulled me aside afterward and said something I've never forgotten. He said, Ashford, talent without opportunity is the most common tragedy in this country.
I'm not going to let it happen to you. He put me on a career path that led to everything I have today. She looked back at Marcus. I've spent the last 3 years looking for someone to do that for. Someone with the talent and the character, who just needed someone to open a door. Last night, on a frozen sidewalk, I found him.
Marcus didn't trust his voice, so he didn't use it. He picked up the folder. It was heavier than he expected, thick with documents, contracts, benefit summaries, training schedules. "Take it home," Catherine said. "Read every page. Talk to Zoe. Talk to your sister. If you have questions, my personal cell is on the card. Call me anytime."
And if I say no?
Then you say no, and you go back to Gary, and you keep being the best welder Jim Kowalski has ever had. And I send you a thank you gift for saving my life. And we never see each other again.
Catherine paused.
But Marcus, I need you to hear this. If you say no, I'll respect it. But I'll know it's a waste. Not because welding is beneath you. It isn't. Honest work is honest work. But because you have something that most people in my industry spend their entire careers trying to develop and never do. And letting that go untapped because nobody ever gave you a chance would be exactly the kind of tragedy Admiral Rourke warned me about. Marcus held the folder against his chest.
I need to think. Take all the time you need. The offer stands for 30 days. He stood. Catherine stood with him. She extended her hand again, and this time, when Marcus shook it, she held on for an extra second.
Marcus, one more thing.
Yeah?
Last night, when you were on the ground with that man pinned, and you called out to ask if I was okay, you were bleeding. Did you know that? He cut you. Right forearm. Probably when you grabbed the knife hand.
Marcus looked at his right arm. Under the flannel sleeve there was a cut he hadn't noticed. A thin line, already scabbing over, about 3 inches long. I didn't feel it.
I know. That's my point.
Marcus collected Zoe from the reading corner. She came reluctantly, clutching the Saturn book.
Daddy, did you know that Saturn has 83 moons? 83! And one of them, Titan, has an atmosphere, like a real atmosphere, with weather.
That's amazing, Princess.
Can I get this book?
That book belongs to the cafe, baby.
Oh.
Zoe's face fell for exactly 1 second. Then she looked up.
The librarian Gary probably has it.
We'll check Saturday. Catherine walked them to the door. She knelt in front of Zoe one more time.
Zoe, it was wonderful meeting you. You're one of the smartest 9-year-olds I've ever talked to. Thank you. I hope your stitches don't hurt. They don't. Your dad made sure of that.
Outside, walking back toward the motel, Zoe held Marcus's hand and swung it back and forth the way she did when she was happy.
She was nice, Daddy.
Yeah, she was.
Is she your friend now?
I don't know what she is, Princess.
She looked at you like you were important.
Marcus stopped walking. What?
When she talked to you, she looked at you the way my teacher looks at the smart kids, like she could see something.
Marcus knelt on the sidewalk, right there on Michigan Avenue, the same way he'd knelt in front of Zoe last night before everything changed. He looked at his daughter, 9 years old, heart surgery survivor, the smartest, bravest person he'd ever known. Zoe, I need to tell you something. That woman, Catherine, she offered me a job.
A job? Like building stuff?
No, different. Security. Protecting people.
Like a bodyguard?
Something like that. But it would mean some big changes. I'd have to train for 12 weeks in Virginia. You'd stay with Aunt Denise. And after that, we might move to Chicago. Zoe processed this with the same seriousness she applied to everything. She chewed her bottom lip. She looked down the street, then back at her father. "Would you still be my daddy?" The question almost broke him. Zoe, always. No matter what. Nothing changes that. Ever.
Would the job make you happy? There it was again. The question she'd asked in the outline of his life before any of this happened. The question that a 9-year-old shouldn't have to ask because she shouldn't have to worry about her father's happiness. But she asked it because she was Zoe, and Zoe noticed everything. "I think it might, baby. I think it really might." "Then you should do it." She squeezed his hand. "You always take care of me. Someone should take care of you, too." Marcus pulled her into his arms on that frozen Chicago sidewalk, and for the second time in 12 hours, his hands were shaking. But this time it wasn't adrenaline, and it wasn't fear. He held his daughter, and he didn't let go for a long time. They checked out of the motel at noon. Marcus tipped Dana $20, almost everything he had left, because she'd watched Zoe and been kind when kindness wasn't in the job description. "Take care of that girl," Dana said. "She's special." "Don't I know it?" The drive back to Gary took 3 hours and 12 minutes. Zoe slept most of the way, the Saturn book from the cafe somehow in her lap. Marcus didn't ask how she'd gotten it. He suspected Catherine had bought it and slipped it to her when he wasn't looking. The folder sat on the passenger seat. Marcus glanced at it every few miles, the way you'd glance at something you weren't sure was real. $130,000. Benefits. Health care for Zoe. An education fund. A life he'd never let himself imagine, because imagining things you couldn't have was a luxury he'd given up around the same time Keisha walked out the door. He pulled into their apartment complex in Gary at 4:15 p.m. Same parking lot, same cracked asphalt, same building with the peeling paint and the mailbox that didn't lock. Zoe woke up when the engine stopped. "We're home?" "We're home." She looked out the window at the apartment building. Then she looked at her father. "Daddy?"
"Yeah, baby?"
"Chicago was better."
Marcus sat in the car for a long time after Zoe went inside. He held the folder in his lap. He opened it. The first page was a letter, handwritten on Catherine Ashford's personal stationery. "Marcus, I don't believe in accidents. I believe in choices. You made one last night that saved my life. Now I'm making one that I hope changes yours. This isn't charity. This isn't guilt. This is recognition. You deserve to be seen. Catherine." He closed the folder. He looked at the apartment building where his daughter was probably already sitting on the couch, reading about Saturn's 83 moons. And for the first time in 7 years, Marcus Turner let himself think about what his life could look like if someone finally opened a door. He didn't call Catherine that night, or the next day, or the day after that. Marcus went back to work at Kowalski & Sons on Monday morning like nothing had happened. Clocked in at 6 a.m., put on his helmet, picked up his torch, welded steel beams on the Harrison Street overpass project for 10 hours straight, the same way he'd done every Monday for the past 12 years. His hands knew the work better than his brain did. The angle of the torch, the speed of the bead, the way the metal changed color right before it was ready. He could do this in his sleep. Some days he felt like he was. Jim Kowalski found him during lunch break. Jim was 62, built like a fire hydrant, and ran his crew the way a good sergeant runs a platoon, hard but fair. "Turner, you're quiet today." "I'm always quiet, Jim." "You're quieter than quiet. Something happened in Chicago?" Marcus unwrapped his sandwich. Peanut butter and jelly on white bread. Same lunch he'd packed every day since Zoe started school, because it was cheap and he could make 2. One for him, one for her, in under a minute. Zoe's checkup went fine. Heart looks good. That's not what I asked. Marcus chewed, swallowed, looked at Jim, this man who'd hired him at 25 with no experience and taught him every skill he had. Something happened. I'm still figuring it out. Jim nodded. He wasn't the kind of man who pushed. When you figure it out, let me know if it affects my crew. Yes, sir. He worked the rest of the week. Picked Zoe up from school every day at 3:15. Made dinner. Helped with homework. Read to her at night because even though she could read better than most adults, she still liked hearing his voice before she fell asleep. It was their ritual. Had been since she was 3. The folder sat on his kitchen table. He read through it every night after Zoe went to bed. Every page. The training schedule. 12 weeks of tactical instruction, physical conditioning, crisis simulation, firearms certification. The benefits package. Health insurance that covered everything, including pre-existing conditions. Zoe's heart. The education fund. $15,000 a year set aside for college. He read Catherine's handwritten letter 4 times. Each time, he focused on a different line. This isn't charity. This isn't guilt. This is recognition. On Thursday night, his phone rang. Catherine. He let it ring 3 times before answering. Marcus, I'm not calling to pressure you. I just wanted to check in. I'm reading through everything. Good. Do you have questions? He had 100. He asked the one that mattered most. The other trainees, what's their background? Most are former military, some law enforcement, a few private sector security professionals looking to advance. You'd be the only one without formal tactical experience. So I'd be behind from day one. In some ways, yes. In others, you'd be ahead of everyone in the room. You keep saying that, but you're basing it on one night, one incident. What if that's all I am? What if I got lucky? Catherine was quiet for a moment. Marcus, I've been evaluating people under pressure for 22 years. Luck gets you through 1 second. You sustained control for over a minute against an armed attacker while managing the safety of a child and a civilian. That's not luck. That's wiring. Wiring. The way your brain processes threat, the way you prioritize, the way you stay calm when your body is flooded with adrenaline. These are neurological traits, Marcus. Some people have them. Most don't. Training enhances what's already there. It doesn't create it. Marcus rubbed his eyes. He was sitting at the kitchen table, the folder open in front of him, the apartment quiet, except for the draft under the door and the sound of the upstairs neighbor's TV. I'm scared. He said it before he could stop himself. I'm 37 years old. I've worked the same job since I was 25, and I'm scared that I'll show up in Virginia and everyone will see exactly what I am. A welder who got lucky one night in Chicago. Do you want to know what I see? I'm not sure. I see a man who's been told his whole life that the ceiling is where he is, that welding is as far as he gets, that a man from the South Side without a degree doesn't get to want more. And I see a man who's starting to realize that ceiling was never real. Marcus closed his eyes. His throat was tight. I need a few more days. Take them. The offer stands. He hung up. He sat at the table for another hour. Then he picked up the phone and called Denise. His sister answered on the first ring. Marcus, it's 11 o'clock on the Thursday. Either someone's dead or you need to talk. I need to talk. I'm listening. He told her everything. The robbery, Catherine, the offer, the salary, Virginia, all of it. Denise was quiet through the whole thing, which was unusual for a woman who had an opinion about everything and wasn't shy about sharing it. When he finished, the silence stretched. Denise? I'm here. I'm just trying to figure out if you're calling me to ask permission
or to talk yourself out of it? I don't know which one. Yes, you do. You already know what you want to do. You've known since you read that letter. You're calling me because you need someone to tell you it's okay to want something for yourself. Marcus pressed his hand to his forehead. It's not about me. It's about Zoe. Marcus Anthony Turner, don't you dare hide behind that child. I'm not hiding. She has doctors here, school, routine. Stability matters when your kid has a heart condition. Her doctor is in Chicago, 3 hours away. This job puts you in Chicago. Better schools, better insurance. She'd have a real education fund instead of the $2,200 you've managed to scrape together in 9 years. Don't tell me this isn't good for Zoe. What if I fail? What if you do? You come back to Gary and pick up a welding torch, and nothing's different except you tried. That's not failure, Marcus. Failure is sitting at that kitchen table for the next 30 years, wondering what would have happened. You sound like Mom. Good. Mom was right about most things. Marcus almost smiled. Would you take Zoe for the 12 weeks? Boy, you know I'd take that girl in a heartbeat. She's the best thing in my life besides my job and my couch. It's a lot. Her medication schedule, her diet, the checkups. I'm a registered nurse, Marcus. I think I can handle a medication schedule. She has nightmares sometimes, about the surgeries. She wakes up and she puts her hand on her chest, and she needs someone to tell her it's still beating. Denise's voice softened. I know, baby brother. I know what she needs. And I know what you need. You need to stop being afraid of the door because you've never walked through one before. He called Catherine on Saturday morning. Zoe was at the kitchen table eating cereal, and Marcus stood in the hallway with the phone pressed to his ear. I'm in. 2 words. The biggest 2 words he'd ever spoken. Except maybe, I do, to Keisha, which hadn't worked out. And she's beautiful when the nurse put Zoe in his arms, which had. Catherine didn't celebrate, didn't gush. She responded the way a commanding officer responds when a good soldier reports for duty. Training starts March 3rd. I'll send you the logistics package today. Travel, housing, everything's covered. You'll fly out of O'Hare. I've never flown. A pause. Ever? Never had a reason to. Then that'll be your first new experience of many. Marcus, you made the right call. I hope so. I know so. The 2 weeks before Virginia were the hardest 2 weeks of Marcus's life, and nothing even happened during them. It was all in his head. Every night, lying awake, running scenarios. What if the training was too much? What if the other recruits looked at him, a black construction worker from Indiana with no military record, and decided he didn't belong? What if he got hurt and couldn't provide for Zoe? What if Zoe needed him and he was 1,000 miles away? He told Jim Kowalski he was taking a leave of absence. Jim studied him for a long time. This about what happened in Chicago? Yeah. You coming back? I don't know, Jim. I honestly don't know. Jim extended his hand. Turner, you've been the backbone of this crew for 12 years. Whatever you're walking toward, it's lucky to have you. The morning he left, Zoe cried. She stood in Denise's doorway with her backpack on, because she'd packed it herself with everything she thought she'd need. Books, her heart medication, a photo of Marcus, and a flashlight in case of emergencies. And she cried in a quiet way that was worse than screaming.
Daddy, what if your plane crashes?
It's not going to crash, Princess.
What if the training is dangerous and you get hurt?
I'll be careful.
What if I have a nightmare and you're not there?
Marcus knelt. He took her hands. Then you call me. 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, I don't care. You call me and I'll answer. Every single time. You hear me?
Every time?
Every time. Denise stood behind Zoe, her arms crossed, her jaw set in that way that meant she was holding herself together
through pure willpower. "Get on the plane, Marcus. We'll be fine." He hugged Zoe for a long time. Then he got in the cab. He didn't look back, because if he looked back, he wouldn't go. The flight to Virginia was 90 minutes. Marcus gripped the armrest during takeoff and didn't let go until the pilot said they'd reached cruising altitude. The man next to him, a businessman in the gray suit, glanced at his white-knuckled hands.
First time flying? That obvious? You'll get used to it. Marcus wasn't sure about that.
The Ashford Global Security Training Facility was 40 minutes south of Richmond, on a property that looked like a cross between a military base and a college campus. Clean buildings, manicured grounds, a running track, an obstacle course that Marcus could see from the parking lot, and even from that distance, it looked like something designed to break people. He checked in at the front desk. A woman in a crisp uniform handed him a room key, a training schedule, and a folder of orientation materials. "Turner, Marcus, Cohort 14. You're in Building C, Room 217. Orientation is at 0600 tomorrow. Don't be late. Nobody's ever late twice." His room was small, clean, and had a bed that was better than the one in his apartment. He sat on it and called Zoe.
"Daddy, how was the plane?"
"Bumpy."
"Were you scared?"
"A little."
"That's okay. Being scared means you're doing something brave. You told me that when I went in for my second surgery."
Marcus closed his eyes. "I did say that, didn't I?"
"Yep, and I was brave. So now it's your turn."
"When did you get so smart?"
"I've always been smart, Daddy. You just keep forgetting."
He laughed. Really laughed. For the first time in days. Orientation was at 6 a.m. 22 recruits stood in a concrete room with fluorescent lights. And Marcus scanned the group the way he used to scan a new job site, looking for the load-bearing walls and the weak spots. Most of the recruits were younger, mid to late 20s, military haircuts, straight posture. They carried themselves like people who'd been told when to stand and when to sit, and had learned to like it. Marcus was the oldest by at least 7 years. He was the only one without a military or law enforcement background.
He was one of 3 black men in the group, and the only one who looked like he'd spent the last decade lifting steel beams instead of doing tactical drills. The lead instructor was a man named Garrett Hale, former Secret Service, 15 years on presidential protection details. 50 years old, lean, with eyes that registered everything and gave nothing away. "Welcome to Ashford Global Security's Executive Protection Training Program. Over the next 12 weeks, we're going to teach you how to protect people whose lives are worth more than yours. Not because they're better than you. They're not. But because protecting them is the job you signed up for." He paced the front of the room. "Some of you have military training. Good. Forget most of it. We're not at war. We're in boardrooms, hotels, airports, galas. You'll learn to neutralize threats while wearing a suit. You'll learn to spot danger in a crowd of 1,000 people. You'll learn to make decisions in under 3 seconds that will determine whether your client lives or dies." Hale stopped pacing. His eyes moved across the room and landed on Marcus. "Turner." "Yes, sir." "You're the welder." 21 heads turned. "Yes, sir." "You stopped an armed robbery in Chicago. Disarmed a man with a knife. No training, no backup." "Yes, sir." "How long did the encounter last?" "I'm told about 8 seconds, sir." Hale studied him. 8 seconds. Most engagements in executive protection last between 3 and 12. You're already in the range. He looked at the rest of the group. Turner has no military background, no law enforcement experience. He's here because our CEO identified raw tactical instinct that most of you spent years trying to develop. For those of you who think that means he doesn't belong here, I suggest you watch him in the simulations before you make up your minds.
Marcus felt every eye in the room. Some curious,
Some skeptical, a few openly hostile. A tall, blond man in the second row. Marcus would later learn his name was Kyle Brennan, former Army Ranger, 2 tours in Afghanistan. Leaned over to the man next to him and whispered something. Both men looked at Marcus. Neither was smiling. The first 2 weeks were classroom, theory, protocols, legal frameworks. Marcus struggled. Not because he couldn't understand the material. His mind was sharper than he'd given it credit for. But because the pace was relentless, and 12 years of welding hadn't prepared him for sitting in a chair for 8 hours, absorbing information like a graduate student. He studied every night until midnight. Called Zoe at 9 p.m. on the dot. She'd tell him about school, about Denise's cooking. Aunt Denise thinks ketchup is a spice, Daddy. About the Saturn book she'd finished, and the Jupiter book she'd started. Daddy, Jupiter has a storm that's been going on for hundreds of years. It's called the Great Red Spot. Can you imagine being in a storm for that long? I'm kind of in one right now, Princess. Are you doing okay? I'm hanging in there. Daddy? Yeah? Don't quit. I won't. Promise? I promise. Week 3. The physical training started. This was where Marcus found his footing. Obstacle courses, endurance runs, hand-to-hand combat drills. His body, 12 years of construction-hardened muscle, responded to the physical demands like it had been waiting for them. He wasn't the fastest. Brennan and a former Marine named Ortiz had him beat on speed. But Marcus was the strongest, the most durable, and he had something the instructors started to notice. He didn't panic. In the combat simulations, when the pressure ramped up, when the scenarios got chaotic and confusing and loud, most recruits' performance degraded. Heart rate spiked. Decisions slowed. Fine motor skills went to hell. Marcus got calmer. The worse things got, the more focused he became. Hale pulled him aside after a simulation in week 4. Turner, your heart rate during that exercise was 68 beats per minute. Is that bad? The average was 112. Brennan hit 130. You were at 68. Hale crossed his arms. I've seen that kind of parasympathetic response in exactly 2 categories of people: trained snipers and natural-born protectors. Since you've never held a rifle, I'm guessing it's the latter. I just don't see the point in panicking. No, you don't. And that's why you're going to be very good at this. The academic work remained hard. Marcus was near the bottom of the class on written exams, in the middle on tactical theory. Brennan, who'd warmed up to Marcus about as much as a glacier warms up to the sun, made sure everyone knew it. Hey, Turner! Brennan caught him in the hallway after a particularly brutal tactics exam. What'd you get? 74. I got 92. Ortiz got 88. Brennan leaned against the wall. No shame in washing out, man. Not everybody's built for this. Marcus looked at him. You done? Just saying. Ashford might have felt guilty about the robbery thing and brought you in as a feel-good story. But guilt doesn't pass the certification exam. Something hot moved through Marcus's chest. Not anger, exactly. He'd learned a long time ago that anger was a luxury he couldn't afford. But something close. Something that remembered every person who'd ever told him what he couldn't do. Brennan, you got 92 on a written test. That's good. I mean that. But last week, in Simulation 7, when the scenario went sideways and the mock shooter changed position, you froze for 4 seconds. I watched you. 4 seconds, standing in the open, while your client was exposed. Brennan's face changed. I didn't freeze, Marcus continued. I had my client behind cover in 2. So you can have your 92. I'll take my 68 heartbeat. He walked away. Brennan didn't follow him. And he didn't bring up test scores again. Week 8. The simulations got harder. Live scenarios with role players, blank rounds, smoke, noise, chaos. The instructors designed them to be overwhelming. Multiple threats, conflicting information, clients who panicked and made everything worse. In Simulation 12, a live exercise involving a mock corporate kidnapping, everything went wrong. The primary team lost communication. The secondary team was pinned by simulated gunfire. The client, played by a staff member, started hyperventilating. Marcus was on the secondary team. He assessed the situation in 3 seconds, told his team to hold position, moved alone through a corridor the instructors hadn't expected anyone to use. He'd noticed it during a building walkthrough 2 weeks earlier and filed it away. He reached the client, calmed her down, and extracted her through a service entrance while the primary team was still trying to re-establish comms. The debrief lasted an hour. Hale stood at the front of the room and replayed Marcus's movements on a screen. Turner broke protocol. He left his team. He moved without authorization through an unsecured corridor. Hale paused. And he was the only person in this room who got the client out. Does anyone want to guess why? Silence. Because he was paying attention. Not just during the exercise. For weeks. He noticed an exit route that none of our scenario designers considered, because he walks through buildings the way a man who's spent his life on construction sites walks through buildings. He sees structure. He sees pathways. He sees how things connect. Hale looked at Marcus. Turner, you broke 3 protocols in that exercise. Yes, sir. You also saved the client. What does that tell you? That protocols matter until they don't. Hale almost smiled. Correct. Protocols are the floor. Instinct is the ceiling. Most operatives live on the floor. A few reach the ceiling. He turned back to the group. Turner reached the ceiling in week 8. Some of you won't reach it in your entire career. Think about that. That night, Marcus called Zoe. Daddy, I lost a tooth. Which one? Bottom front. Aunt Denise said the tooth fairy gives $5 here. The tooth fairy gives $1, Zoe. Nice try. Aunt Denise said, Aunt Denise is not the tooth fairy's financial advisor. Zoe giggled. The sound traveled 1,000 miles through a phone line and landed in Marcus's chest like a warm hand. Daddy, how many more weeks? 4. I'm counting the days. I made a chart. It's on Aunt Denise's fridge. I'm counting too, baby. Are you still brave? Marcus thought about Simulation 12, about Brennan's face in the hallway, about Hale's words, about the ceiling. Getting braver every day, Princess. Good, because I need you to be brave enough to fly home. And you said the plane was bumpy. I'll manage. Daddy? Yeah? I'm proud of you. Marcus pressed the phone against his ear and didn't say anything for a long time. He didn't trust his voice. He didn't need to. Zoe waited on the other end, patient the way only she could be, and the silence between them said everything that words couldn't. The last 4 weeks broke people. Not physically, though the physical demands were punishing enough. It was the psychological pressure that cracked recruits open. The instructors designed the final phase to simulate the worst-case scenarios an executive protection operative could face. Ambush situations with no clear exit. Clients who refuse to cooperate. Multiple simultaneous threats. Communications failures. Team members going down. Every day was a test. Every test was harder than the one before. 2 recruits washed out in week 9. A former police detective from Dallas who couldn't handle the sleep deprivation component, and a younger guy, ex-Coast Guard, who froze during a live extraction drill and couldn't recover. Marcus watched them clean out their rooms and walk to the parking lot with their bags. Neither looked back. Brennan, to his credit, didn't freeze again. Whatever Marcus had said in that hallway had landed somewhere important, because the former ranger started performing with a focus that hadn't been there before. He and Marcus still weren't friends. They were too different for that. And Brennan still carried something hard in the way he looked at Marcus. But there was a grudging respect now, the kind that forms between men who push each other without admitting it. Week 10 brought the team exercises, 4-person units running continuous 72-hour protection details with rotating threats, sleep schedules of 4 hours a night, and clients who'd been specifically instructed to be as difficult as humanly possible. Marcus was assigned to a team with Brennan, Ortiz, and a former FBI analyst named Sarah Chen, who was the quietest person in the cohort, and also the smartest. "Well," Brennan said when they got their team assignment, "this should be fun." "It'll be fine," Marcus said.
You don't know that.
"I know I've worked with worse. I spent 6 months in a crew with a guy who welded left-handed and swore it didn't matter. Trust me, Brennan. We'll manage." Chen laughed. Ortiz grinned. Even Brennan's mouth twitched. 48 hours into the exercise, everything fell apart. Their primary, a staff member playing a CEO under threat, deviated from the planned route. Simultaneously, the instructors introduced a second threat team that the scenario briefing hadn't mentioned. Communications went down. Ortiz took a simulated hit and was declared incapacitated, which meant he had to lie on the ground for 20 minutes while the remaining 3 handled a crisis designed for 4. Brennan took point on perimeter. Chen handled intelligence. And Marcus did what Marcus did. He stayed with the client. The client was panicking. A woman in her 30s who was good at her job as a role player, which meant she was very good at making things harder. She was crying, hyperventilating, grabbing Marcus's arm hard enough to leave bruises.
"They're going to kill us! Oh my God, they're going to kill us!"
"Ma'am, look at me." Marcus's voice was level. 68 heartbeats per minute, maybe 70. "Look at my eyes. Nobody's dying today. I need you to breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Can you do that?"
I can't breathe."
"Yes, you can. You're breathing right now. You're talking to me, which means you're breathing. We're going to walk through that door. We're going to turn left, and my team is going to get us out. But I need you to stay with me. Can you stay with me?" She looked at him. Something in his face, in the absolute immovable calm of it, reached through her panic. She nodded. "Good. Stay behind me, hand on my back. Don't let go." They moved. Marcus led her through the building using the structural awareness that Hale had identified weeks ago. Reading the space, finding the angles, knowing which corridors connected to which exits because he'd walked the building a dozen times and studied its layout the way he used to study blueprints at Kowalski's. Brennan was waiting at the extraction point. "Took you long enough?" "Client safe. That's the metric." "Ortiz is still down." "Then we cover his sector until the clock runs out. Chen, you have eyes on the second team?" "Northwest corridor, 3 of them, moving slow." "They're probing. They don't know where we are. Brennan, hold the exit. Chen, keep tracking. Nobody moves until I say." Brennan stared at him. Marcus hadn't given orders before. Not once in 10 weeks. He deferred, collaborated, supported. But with Ortiz down and the scenario collapsing, something shifted. He didn't ask to lead. He just did. "Roger that," Brennan said quietly, and he held the exit. They completed the exercise. All 4 team members passed.
Ortiz was revived at the 48-hour mark and reintegrated. But in the debrief, Hale focused on one moment. When Ortiz went down, Turner assumed command. He didn't have the highest tactical score. He didn't have the most experience. But in that moment, every person on the team followed him without hesitation. Hale looked at the four of them. Does anyone want to explain why? Silence. Because he was calm, Chen said. When everything went sideways, his voice didn't change, not once. And when someone's that calm in chaos, you follow them. It's instinct.
Hale nodded. Leadership isn't rank. It isn't seniority. It's the ability to make people believe they're going to be okay when everything says they won't be. Turner did that. He paused. Turner's been doing that his whole life. He just didn't have the title for it until now. Marcus called Zoe that night. It was late, almost midnight, but she answered on the second ring.
Daddy, why are you calling so late?
Why are you still awake?
I was reading about Neptune. Did you know Neptune has winds that go over 1,000 miles per hour? That's faster than the speed of sound.
Zoe, it's a school night.
Aunt Denise fell asleep on the couch. She won't know.
I'll know.
Fine. How was your day?
Long. Hard. Good.
Did you do something brave?
I think I did something I didn't know I could do.
That's the bravest kind of thing, Daddy. That's what I told my class.
You told your class about me?
We had to do a presentation on someone we admire. I did mine on you.
Marcus sat on his bed in Building C, room 217, and pressed his palm to his chest. The gesture was unconscious. He'd picked it up from Zoe without realizing it. His heart was beating. Hers was too. 1,000 miles apart.
What'd you say? I said my daddy used to build bridges, and now he protects people. And that both of those things are about making sure nobody falls.
Marcus couldn't speak. He tried. The words were there, but they wouldn't come out past whatever had lodged itself in his throat.
Daddy, are you there?
I'm here, baby. I'm always here.
2 more weeks.
2 more weeks. Week 11. Firearms certification. This was the piece Marcus had dreaded most. He'd never held a gun, never fired one. Growing up on the South Side, guns were everywhere, and he'd made a deliberate choice to stay away from them. Guns took people. His cousin Darnell at 17. His friend Marcus, same name, different life, at 21. 2 men from his block who didn't make it to 25. The firearms instructor was a compact woman named Torres, who'd spent 12 years as a military police officer. She started with safety, then mechanics, then the range. Marcus's hands were steady on the welding torch. They were steady pinning a thief to a sidewalk. They were not steady holding a Glock 19 for the first time. His first 10 rounds hit everything except the target. Breathe, Turner. Torres was behind him. You're gripping too hard. This isn't a tool you're trying to control. It's an extension of your hand. I've never wanted to hold one of these. Nobody asked if you wanted to. Can you? He adjusted his grip, breathed, squeezed. The 11th round hit paper. The 12th hit center mass. There, Torres said. That's your natural point of aim. Stop fighting the weapon and let your body do what it already knows how to do. By the end of the week, Marcus qualified at level 3. Not exceptional, not record-breaking, but clean, consistent, and within every standard the program required. Torres signed his certification without comment, but as he was leaving the range, she said something that stuck. Turner, most people who grow up around gun violence either love guns or hate them. You're the first person I've trained who respects them. That's the right relationship to have for the firearm. Week 12. Final evaluations. Written exams, physical assessments, and a capstone simulation that lasted 36 hours straight and involved every skill they'd been taught. Marcus scored 81 on the written exam, middle of the pack. He scored 94 on the physical assessment, second highest. Brennan beat him by 1 point, and for the first time, Brennan offered his hand. Good work, Turner. You too, Brennan. For what it's worth, I was wrong about you. For what it's worth, I know. Brennan laughed, a real laugh. You're a pain in the ass, you know that? I've been told. The capstone simulation was the hardest thing Marcus had ever done. Harder than any day at Kowalski's. Harder than Zoe's surgeries, which had been a different kind of hard. The kind where you sit in a waiting room and bargain with God. This was active, constant, relentless. 36 hours of decisions, movements, threats, and the crushing weight of responsibility for a person's safety. Marcus's team performed flawlessly. Not because they were the best 4 individuals. Brennan was the best tactician, Chen the best analyst, Ortiz the best communicator. But as a unit, they operated with a cohesion that the other teams didn't have. And at the center of that cohesion was Marcus, the steady one, the calm voice, the man with a 68 heartbeat who made everyone around him believe they could handle whatever came next. Hale delivered the results to the full cohort. 20 recruits had started. 17 finished. All 17 passed. Every one of you has earned the right to call yourself an Ashford operative. Hale stood at the front of the room for the last time. Some of you will be good at this job. A few of you will be exceptional. And 1 or 2 of you will change the way this company operates. His eyes found Marcus. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Catherine flew in for the graduation ceremony. It was simple. Certificates, handshakes, a group photo. She worked the room with the ease of someone who'd spent decades in command, speaking personally to each graduate, learning their names if she didn't already know them. When she reached Marcus, she stopped. How do you feel? Like I just ran a marathon and someone's telling me there's another one tomorrow. That's exactly how you should feel. The training is the easy part, Marcus. The work is where it gets real. You call that the easy part? I call it the foundation. What you build on it is up to you. She handed him an envelope. Your assignment, Chicago office. You start in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? You need time with Zoe. Go home. Be her father. Eat something that isn't cafeteria food. Then report to the Chicago office on April 28th. Marcus opened the envelope. His assignment details. His official title? Level 3 Executive Protection Operative, Ashford Global Security, Midwest Division. His salary, in print, looked even more impossible than it had sounded. Catherine. Yes? Thank you. I know I said it before, but I need to say it again. Thank you. Don't thank me. Prove me right. He flew home. The turbulence didn't bother him this time. He was too busy thinking about what came next. The apartment he needed to find in Chicago. The school he needed to research for Zoe. The logistics of moving a life that had been standing still for 12 years. Zoe was waiting at Denise's apartment. She'd made a sign. Welcome home, Daddy, in multicolored marker, with a drawing of what appeared to be Saturn, but might have been a pancake, and taped it to the front door. When Marcus walked in, she hit him at full speed, arms around his waist, face buried in his chest. You're back! You're back! You're back! You're back! I'm back, Princess. Did you pass? I passed. Are you a bodyguard now?
Executive Protection Operative.
That's a bodyguard, Daddy.
Yeah, that's a bodyguard. Denise stood in the kitchen doorway. She looked tired. 12 weeks of raising a 9-year-old with a heart condition while working full-time at the hospital had taken something out of her. But she was smiling. She didn't sleep last night, kept asking what time your plane landed. Thank you, Denise, for everything. You're my brother. There's no thank you for that. There's just family. Marcus spent 2 weeks in Gary. He packed up the apartment. It took 1 day, which said something about how little he owned. He drove Zoe around the neighborhood so she could say goodbye to her friends, her teacher, the librarian at the public library who'd been ordering space books specifically for her. "Mr. Turner, I'm going to miss your daughter," the librarian said. "She's the only 9-year-old who's ever asked me to interlibrary loan a college textbook on astrophysics." "That sounds like Zoe." "You're raising her right." "I'm trying." On their last night in Gary, Marcus sat on the floor of the empty apartment with Zoe. Their sleeping bags were laid out. The walls were bare. The place looked bigger without furniture, and smaller at the same time. Like without their things, you could see how tight the rooms really were, how low the ceilings, how small the kitchen, where Marcus had made 1,000 peanut butter sandwiches. "Daddy, are you sad to leave?" "A little. This is where you grew up."
I can grow up somewhere else, too.
"You can grow up anywhere, Zoe. That's the whole point." "What point?" "The point of all of this. Virginia, the training, moving. The point is that you should get to grow up somewhere that matches how big you are." "I'm not that big, Daddy. I'm short for my age." "That's not what I mean, and you know it." Zoe smiled. She crawled into her sleeping bag and pulled it up to her chin. "Daddy, tell me a story." "What kind?" "A true one, about something that happened to you." Marcus thought. He could tell her about the training, about the simulations, about Brennan or Hale or Torres. But that wasn't the story she needed. "A few months ago, your dad was standing in a pharmacy in Chicago. It was really cold outside, and he was looking at a number on a screen. $214 for your medication. And he had $241 in his bank account. That was everything." Zoe was quiet.
And he thought, this is my life. This is as far as I go. Not because I'm not smart enough or strong enough, but because nobody ever showed me a different road.
Marcus paused. And then something happened. Something scary and crazy and unexpected. And a woman looked at your dad and saw something he didn't see in himself. And she opened a door. "The lady you saved?" "Catherine, yeah." And your dad was terrified to walk through that door. Terrified. Because the thing about doors is, once you go through, you can't pretend they don't exist anymore. You can't go back to not knowing what's on the other side. What was on the other side? I'll tell you when we get there, Princess. We're still walking through. Zoe reached out and found his hand in the dark. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you walked through." "Me too, baby. Me too." They drove to Chicago on a Sunday. The car was packed tight. Everything they owned fit in a 12-year-old Honda Civic with 180,000 miles on it. Zoe had the Saturn book on her lap and a new notebook Denise had given her as a going-away present. The apartment was in Lincoln Park. 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, a living room with windows that let in actual sunlight. Zoe walked through it in a state of disbelief. "Daddy, we have 2 bathrooms." "Yes, we do." "And the heater works?" "The heater works." "And there's no draft under the door?" "No draft." Zoe stood in the middle of the living room and turned in a slow circle. Then she looked at Marcus with an expression he'd never seen on her face before. It took him a moment to identify it. It was relief. Not the kind that comes from a crisis passing, but the kind that comes from a child realizing that things might actually be okay. That the tightness she'd been carrying, in her chest, around her heart, in the worried way she watched her father count dollars, might finally loosen.
This is ours?
This is ours.
For real?
For real, Zoe. She walked into her bedroom. It was small by most standards, but enormous compared to what she'd had in Gary. She put the Saturn book on the windowsill. She looked out at the street.
Daddy, there's a park across the street.
I know. That's why I picked this place.
And the school?
4 blocks. You can walk.
Can I walk by myself?
Absolutely not. But we'll walk together. Zoe turned from the window. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around Marcus's waist. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her arms said it. Her heartbeat against his stomach said it. The way she held on, not the desperate grip of a scared child, but the steady hold of a kid who finally believed the ground beneath her was solid, said everything. Marcus held his daughter in their new apartment, in a city that had almost broken him once, and was now giving him everything. And he made a promise. Not out loud. Promises spoken out loud were for other people to hear. This one was for him. He would not waste this. He would not fail this girl. He would become whatever he needed to become so that she never had to worry about a number on a pharmacy screen again. The next morning, he put on a suit for the first time in his life. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror and adjusted the tie that Catherine's assistant had helped him pick out. The man looking back at him was someone he almost didn't recognize. Same face, same hands, scarred and thick from welding. But the eyes were different. Something had moved behind them. Something that had been sleeping for 12 years and was finally awake. He dropped Zoe at her new school. She was nervous, gripping his hand tight at the front entrance, scanning the hallway with wide eyes. What if they don't like me? Then they have bad taste. Daddy, I'm serious. Zoe, listen to me. You are the smartest, kindest, bravest person I have ever known. If anyone in that school doesn't see that, it's their loss, not yours. What if I miss Gary? You can miss Gary. Missing a place doesn't mean you were wrong to leave it. It means it mattered. And it did matter. But this matters too. Zoe looked at the school doors. She took a breath. She let go of his hand. Pick me up at 3:15? I'll be here at 3:10. Daddy. 3:15. I'll be here. She walked through the doors. She didn't look back. And Marcus stood on that sidewalk, in his new suit, outside his daughter's new school, in a city that 2 months ago he couldn't afford to visit, and he watched her go. Then, he went to work. The Chicago office of Ashford Global Security occupied the 14th floor of a glass tower on Wacker Drive. Marcus walked in on his first day and felt every head turn. Not because they knew his story, most of them didn't yet, but because he was new, and new people got measured. He understood that. He'd been measuring people his whole life. On construction sites, you figured out in the first hour who carried their weight and who didn't. This was no different, just a different kind of weight. His supervisor was a woman named Grace Nakamura, former Secret Service, 15 years on diplomatic protection details. She was 50, sharp, and had the kind of quiet authority that didn't need volume. Turner, heard a lot about you from Virginia. Good things? Hale says you're the most natural protector he's trained in 8 years. That's not a compliment he gives. That's a fact he reports. She handed him a tablet. Your first assignment, corporate client, tech CEO, mid-level threat profile. She's got a conference at McCormick Place this week. You're on her detail. Solo? 3-person team. You're secondary. Lead is Rodriguez. You watch, you learn. You do exactly what Rodriguez says. Questions? No, ma'am. Good. And Turner? Lose the ma'am. This isn't Virginia. Call me Grace. He worked.
That first week was observation, learning the rhythms of the office, the protocols specific to the Chicago division, the way a real protection detail operated outside of simulation. Rodriguez was a former Marine, 10 years at Ashford, efficient and patient. He walked Marcus through every decision in real time. See the guy in the blue jacket? Third row, left side. I see him. What do you notice? He's fidgeting, keeps reaching into his right pocket. But his body language isn't aggressive. He's nervous, not hostile. How do you know? His shoulders are up, but his hands are open. Hostile people close their hands. Nervous people don't know what to do with theirs. Rodriguez glanced at him. 8 weeks of training, and you're reading body language like you've done this for years? I've been reading body language my whole life. Where I grew up, you either learned or you got caught off guard. Where'd you grow up? South Side. Then you've been training longer than most of us. By the end of the first month, Rodriguez told Grace that Marcus was ready for primary detail. Grace pushed back. Protocol required 6 months as secondary before promotion. Rodriguez pushed harder. Grace, I've been doing this for 10 years. The man reads a room faster than I do. He's calm under pressure in a way that makes clients feel safe before he says a single word. 6 months of secondary is going to waste him. Hale said the same thing. I don't promote based on hype. Then put him on a test detail. Give him a primary and let him prove it. Grace agreed. Marcus's first primary assignment was a pharmaceutical executive attending a 3-day medical conference. Standard threat profile, straightforward logistics. The kind of assignment designed to see if a new operative could handle the responsibility without the chaos. Marcus handled it, not just competently. He handled it in a way that made the client request him specifically for her next trip. She told Grace's office that Marcus was the first security operative she'd worked with, who made her feel like a person instead of a package. He talked to me, the client said. Not about the detail, about real things. He asked about my work. He listened. And the whole time I could tell he was watching everything around us. It was like being protected by someone who actually cared whether I was comfortable, not just whether I was alive. Grace read the feedback report and called Marcus into her office. You got a client request on your first primary. She was easy to work with. That's not what happened, and you know it. What happened is you made a connection. Protection isn't just about stopping threats, Turner. It's about trust. Clients who trust their detail cooperate better, follow protocols, make our job easier. You build trust instinctively. I just treated her the way I'd want someone to treat my daughter. Grace studied him. Hale was right about you. 3 months in, Marcus was handling primary details regularly. 6 months in, he was leading 2-person teams. His client list grew. Tech executives, foreign diplomats visiting Chicago, a federal judge who'd received threats. Each assignment taught him something. Each client reinforced what Catherine and Hale and Rodriguez had seen from the beginning. Marcus Turner had a gift for making people feel safe. He picked Zoe up at 3:15 every day he wasn't on assignment. When he was working, Denise, who'd transferred to a hospital in Chicago because, as she put it, somebody has to make sure you two eat vegetables, covered the afternoon routine. Zoe thrived. Her new school had a real library, a science lab, and a teacher named Mrs. Patterson who recognized Zoe's intellect within the first week and started giving her advanced reading material. Mr. Turner, your daughter asked me to explain dark matter today, Mrs. Patterson told him at the first parent-teacher conference. She's 9. I teach 4th grade.
I had to Google it during my lunch break so I wouldn't look stupid in front of a child. That's Zoe. She's exceptional. Have you considered the gifted program? I didn't know there was one. There is, and she belongs in it. Zoe entered the gifted program. She made friends, real friends, kids who didn't think it was weird that she knew the names of Jupiter's moons or that she had a scar down her sternum from open-heart surgery. Kids who thought both those things were cool. "Daddy, my friend Ava wants to be an astronaut too," Zoe told him one night over dinner. Actual dinner, not peanut butter sandwiches, but grilled chicken and rice and broccoli that Marcus had learned to cook because his daughter deserved meals that came from a stove, not a jar.
Two? You want to be an astronaut? I've always wanted to be an astronaut, Daddy. I just didn't say it before because I didn't think we could afford it. That sentence hit Marcus so hard he had to set his fork down. Zoe, listen to me. You can be anything. Anything. An astronaut, a scientist, a doctor, the president. Don't ever let money decide what you dream about. That's my job, figuring out the money. Your job is dreaming. Even if the dreams are really big, especially if they're really big. Catherine checked in monthly, sometimes by phone, sometimes in person when she was in Chicago for meetings. She and Marcus had developed a relationship that defied easy categorization. Not quite friendship, not quite mentorship, something that sat in the space between gratitude and genuine respect. "How's the team?" she asked during one of their dinners. She'd invited Marcus and Zoe to a restaurant in the Gold Coast, the kind of place Marcus still wasn't entirely comfortable in, but no longer felt like an imposter. "Strong. Rodriguez is the best lead I've worked with. Grace doesn't give compliments, but she hasn't yelled at me either, which I think is her version of approval. Grace told me you're the best natural operative she's seen in the Chicago office. She used the word natural 3 times. Grace doesn't repeat herself. I just show up and do the work. You do more than that, Marcus. You lead. You teach. The younger operatives watch you. Did you know that? Nakamura says the new recruits gravitate toward you. I didn't notice. That's why they gravitate toward you. You're not performing authority. You just have it." Catherine looked at Zoe, who was deep in conversation with the waiter about whether the restaurant's dessert menu included anything with caramel. "She's growing. Too fast. They all do. My daughter's at Stanford now. Feels like yesterday she was Zoe's age." Catherine paused. "Marcus, I want to talk to you about something. The Midwest Division is expanding. We're adding a second team, doubling our client capacity. I need a director of operations." Marcus set his glass down. "You're offering me a promotion. I'm telling you, you've earned one. Director of Operations, Midwest Division. You'd manage all teams, design protection protocols, interface with clients directly. Salary increase to $185,000, plus a leadership bonus structure." "Catherine, I've been here 9 months. And in those 9 months, you've outperformed operatives with 10 years of experience. I don't promote on tenure. I promote on capability. You're ready." "How do you know?" "Because Garrett Hale told me 6 months ago that you'd be ready in a year. And Hale has never been wrong about a timeline in his life. I'm actually a month behind his prediction." Marcus took the promotion. Not because of the money, though the money was life-changing. The kind of number that meant Zoe's education fund was growing, that her medical bills were covered, that he could buy her a telescope for her 10th birthday instead of choosing between that and winter clothes. He took it because for the first time in his life, the work he was doing matched the person he'd always been. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't performing. He was protecting people, leading people, building something. The same instincts he'd always had, just finally pointed at something that recognized their value. 18 months after that frozen February night, Marcus stood in a conference room at Ashford's Chicago office and briefed his team of 35 operatives
on a new protocol he'd designed.
The protocol addressed a gap he'd identified in how they handled multi-site corporate events, a gap that existed because nobody else had thought to look at the problem the way a man who'd spent 12 years reading structural blueprints would.
The weakness isn't at the primary venue, he told his team. It's in the transition zones, the hallways, the loading docks, the parking structures between buildings. Those are the spaces nobody thinks about because they're not where the client is supposed to be. But they're where the client is most vulnerable. Rodriguez, now his senior team lead, nodded. We've been securing destinations. Turner's saying we need to secure the journey. Exactly. The journey is where things go wrong. That's true in protection work, and it's true in life. The protocol was adopted company-wide within 3 months. Catherine called it the Turner Doctrine, which embarrassed Marcus so deeply that he asked her to stop. She didn't. Get used to it.
When you change how a company operates, they put your name on it. That's how it works.
On a Tuesday in October, 20 months after Chicago, 20 months after a knife on a frozen sidewalk and a woman who said, "Sir," Marcus got a call from Lurie Children's Hospital. Zoe's annual cardiology workup was complete. Dr. Okonkwo wanted to see them. Marcus left work early. He picked Zoe up from school, and they drove to the hospital together. Zoe was quiet in the car. She always got quiet before doctor visits. Not scared exactly. She'd been through too much to be scared of hospitals. But watchful. Careful. Like her body remembered things her mind had decided not to think about. "You okay, princess?" "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "About what she's going to say." "Whatever she says, we handle it. Together. That's how we do things." Dr. Okonkwo was a tall woman with kind eyes and the direct manner of someone who'd spent her career delivering news that changed lives.
She greeted Zoe warmly, asked about school, about the gifted program, about the planets. "I hear you're still the space expert, Zoe. I'm learning about exoplanets now. There are over 5,000 confirmed ones. 5,000 worlds. That's a lot of places to explore." Dr. Okonkwo turned to Marcus. "Mr. Turner, I have Zoe's results." Marcus's hands tightened on the armrests. 20 months of good news didn't erase the muscle memory of bad news. His body still braced for impact every time a doctor opened a folder. Zoe's mitral valve repair is holding. The echocardiogram shows strong function. Blood flow is normal. Chamber size is normal. Dr. Okonkwo smiled. "Mr. Turner, your daughter's heart is healthy. Not improving, not stable, healthy. If I didn't know her surgical history, I'd look at these images and see a normal 10-year-old heart." Zoe sat very still. "Does that mean I'm better?" "It means your heart has healed in a way that exceeded our most optimistic projections. You'll still need annual checkups. You'll still need to take care of yourself. But Zoe, the heart that worried us for years is working beautifully." Marcus stood up. He didn't know why. His body just needed to be vertical. He walked to the window of the exam room and stood there with his back to the doctor and his daughter, and he pressed his hand to his mouth. "Daddy?" He couldn't answer. "Daddy, are you crying?" "No." His voice broke on the word. Yeah, I am." "But it's good news." He turned around. His daughter was sitting on the exam table, her legs dangling, her hand pressed to her chest, the way she always did. But this time, the gesture wasn't worry. It was wonder. She was feeling her own heartbeat and marveling at it. "It's the best news, Princess. It's the best news I've ever heard." He crossed the room and pulled her off the table and held her. Dr. Okonkwo quietly stepped out and closed the door behind her, giving them the room. Marcus held his daughter and cried in a way he hadn't allowed himself to cry in years. Not from sadness, not from fear, but from the pure, overwhelming relief of a father who'd spent a decade carrying a weight that had finally been lifted.
"Daddy, you're squishing me."
"I don't care."
"My arms are going numb."
"Still don't care."
"Daddy."
"Okay." He loosened his grip. Not much, just enough so she could breathe. "Okay." Zoe's 11th birthday party was in December. Marcus held it at the Lincoln Park apartment. The apartment with 2 bathrooms and a working heater and no draft under the door. Zoe's friends from school came. Ava, the aspiring astronaut. A boy named Jalen, who shared Zoe's obsession with astrophysics. Mrs. Patterson came. Denise came with a cake she'd made herself that was lopsided but covered in stars because she knew Zoe would love it more than anything from a bakery. Catherine came. She arrived carrying a gift wrapped in silver paper, and when Zoe opened it, the room went quiet. It was a framed photograph. The street corner outside the Peninsula Hotel on Michigan Avenue. The exact spot where Marcus had pinned a man to the sidewalk on a frozen February night. Catherine had gone back and photographed it herself. Beneath the photo, an inscription in Catherine's precise handwriting. Where everything changed. Courage looks like a man who runs toward what everyone else runs from. C.A. Zoe held the photograph in both hands and studied it with the same seriousness she applied to everything. "This is where Daddy helped you. This is where your father changed both our lives," Catherine said. She knelt so she was at Zoe's height. "Mine because he saved me. His because he showed me what real character looks like. And yours, Zoe, because everything you have now, this apartment, your school, your father's work, started on that corner. Because he was brave, and because he taught you something that night without even knowing it." "What?" "That you protect people, even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, even when nobody's watching. You protect people because that's who you are." Catherine looked up at Marcus, who was standing behind Zoe with his arms crossed and his jaw tight. "Your father sent you to safety before he helped me. He made sure you were protected first. Then he went back. Do you know what that tells me?" Zoe shook her head. "It tells me that love and courage aren't 2 different things for your dad. They're the same thing. He loves you so much that he's brave enough to do whatever it takes to make the world better for you. Even fight a man with a knife on a frozen sidewalk." Zoe looked at the photo one more time. Then she looked up at Marcus. "Daddy, can we hang this in the living room?" "Wherever you want, Princess." "Next to the telescope, so when I look at the stars, I can also see where you became who you are." Marcus reached down and took the photo from her hands. He looked at the street corner, the stone pillar, the pavement where Catherine had fallen, the spot where his knee had pressed into a stranger's back while his daughter called 911 from a budget motel lobby. 8 seconds. That's how long the fight had lasted. 8 seconds that had cracked open a life that had been sealed shut for 12 years. Later that night, after the guests had gone, and Zoe was asleep with cake frosting still on her chin, Catherine and Marcus stood in the kitchen. Denise had cleaned up and left. The apartment was quiet. "She's remarkable," Catherine said. "She gets it from herself. I can't take credit." "You can take some credit, Marcus. The person she's becoming has everything to do with the person you've always been." Catherine leaned against the counter. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You've read my entire background file, Catherine. I'm not sure there's anything left that's personal." She smiled. "Fair point. But this isn't in a file. When you were standing in that pharmacy,
the night we met, and you saw the total for Zoe's medication, and you had $241 in your account. What were you thinking?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. He dried a plate, set it down, picked up another one. "I was thinking, this is it. This is as far as I get. I was thinking that my daughter deserves a father who can give her more than this, and I'm never going to be that father. I was thinking that I've been working 12 years, and I was exactly where I started. And that's not bad luck. That's just life. Some people get doors, and some people get walls. And now? Now I know the difference between a door and a wall is whether someone bothers to show you where the handle is. You found the handle yourself, Marcus. I just pointed at the door."
That's more than anyone else ever did. They stood in the kitchen, two people whose lives had collided on a frozen sidewalk through an act of violence and an act of courage. And the silence between them was the kind that doesn't need filling. The kind that exists between people who understand each other well enough to know that some things are bigger than words. "I should go," Catherine said. "Early flight." "Thank you for coming. It meant the world to Zoe." "It meant the world to me." She picked up her coat. At the door, she stopped. "Marcus, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone at my company." "Okay." "The night you saved me, after the police came, after the paramedics, after you'd gone back to your motel, I sat in the back of an ambulance and I cried. Not because I was hurt, because I was ashamed." "Ashamed?" "I've spent 22 years in the military and 15 years in private security. I've trained thousands of people to do exactly what you did. And when it happened to me, when I was the one on the ground, when I was the one who needed help, I couldn't do any of it. My training disappeared. Everything I'd taught other people to do, I couldn't do for myself." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were not. "And then a man I'd never met, a man with no training, no background, no reason in the world to risk himself, did what I couldn't. And he did it better than anyone I've ever trained." "Catherine, let me finish." "I cried because I realized something about myself that night. I'd spent my whole career believing that what we do, the training, the protocols, the tactics, is what makes someone capable of protecting others. And you proved me wrong. What makes someone capable is who they are. Everything else is just refinement." She opened the door. "You didn't just save my life that night, Marcus. You changed how I understand my own work, my own company, everything I've built. You showed me that the most important thing isn't what someone knows. It's what they do when they don't have time to think." She left. Marcus closed the door and stood in his apartment. The apartment with 2 bathrooms, the working heater, the windows that let in light, the framed photograph on the living room wall next to the telescope. The daughter, sleeping in a bedroom that was bigger than the one she'd had in Gary, in a building that didn't have peeling paint, in a neighborhood with a park across the street. He walked to Zoe's room. She was asleep, hand on her chest, not worried, just resting. Her healthy heart beating steady under her palm, 83 times a minute, strong and whole and healed. Marcus leaned against the doorframe and watched her breathe. 2 years later, the phone call came. Marcus was in his office. He had an office now, with a window and a desk and a nameplate that read, "Marcus Turner, Director of Operations, Midwest Division." When Catherine's name lit up his screen. "Marcus, Garrett Hale is retiring." "I heard. He told me last week." "He recommended his replacement." "Who?" "You." Marcus sat down.
Catherine, Hale runs the entire national training program. He does, and he wants you to take it over. And I agree. I've been at this company for 2 years. And in those 2 years, you've redesigned our operational protocols, built the highest performing regional team in the company, and produced a training methodology that's been adopted in every division. Hale says you're the only person he trusts to carry the program forward. That's the Virginia facility. That's national. I'd have to relocate. No, we're moving the training headquarters to Chicago. I've been planning this for 6 months.
The Midwest is central, accessible, and, frankly, it's where our best talent is, including you. Marcus looked out his window at the Chicago skyline, the city that had frozen him, tested him, broken him open, and rebuilt him. What does the position pay? $260,000, plus equity. He closed his eyes. $260,000. He tried to put that number next to $241, the balance in his bank account on the night everything changed, and his brain wouldn't do it. The distance between those two numbers wasn't mathematical. It was existential. I need to talk to Zoe. Of course you do. That evening, he sat across from his daughter at the kitchen table. She was 11 now, taller, her face losing the roundness of childhood and taking on the angles of the young woman she was becoming. She was doing homework, advanced mathematics, because the gifted program had accelerated her 2 grades in math, and she was now doing work that Marcus couldn't help her with if he tried. Zoe, I got offered a new position today. She looked up. Another one? Bigger. I'd be running the national training program, teaching people how to do what I do. You'd be a teacher? Sort of, more like a coach, for the whole company. Would we have to move? No, they're bringing it here, Chicago. Zoe put down her pencil. Daddy, can I say something? Always. 2 years ago, we were living in Gary. You were tired all the time. Your hands hurt. You worried about money every single day. I could see it on your face, even when you tried to hide it. And now you're telling me that a whole company wants you to teach everyone how to do what you do naturally? She paused. That's not luck, Daddy. That's you. When did you turn 40? I'm serious. You always say Catherine opened a door. But you're the one who built everything on the other side. She didn't do that. You did. Marcus looked at his daughter, his 11-year-old daughter, who knew about exoplanets and dark matter, and had a healthy heart, and friends, and a telescope, and a bedroom with real light. His daughter, who'd survived 2 open-heart surgeries, and a mother who left, and a childhood of thin walls and cold drafts, and a father who loved her so much, it sometimes felt like a physical force pressing against his ribs. I'm going to take the job, Zoe. I know. How do you know? Because you're not the kind of person who walks past an open door, Daddy. You never have been. That's the whole point of our story. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. Our story. Yeah, ours. It didn't start with you saving Catherine. It didn't start with the training, or the job, or moving to Chicago. It started with you, in that pharmacy, choosing to buy my medicine even though you could barely afford it. Choosing to save a stranger even though you had everything to lose. Choosing to go to Virginia even though you were scared. Zoe squeezed his hand. Every good thing that's happened to us started with you choosing to do the hard thing instead of the easy thing. That's not Catherine's gift. That's yours. Marcus couldn't speak. He held his daughter's hand across the table, and he thought about a man standing in a CVS on Rush Street, staring at a number on a screen, believing he'd reached his ceiling. He thought about that man, and he barely recognized him, because the ceiling had never been real.
The walls had never been solid. The doors had always been there. He just needed someone to tell him he was allowed to reach for the handle. And then he'd done the rest himself. Years later, when people asked Marcus Turner how a welder from Gary, Indiana, ended up running the most respected executive protection training program in the country, he'd tell the truth. He'd say he stopped a robbery on a cold night in Chicago. He'd say a woman looked at him and saw something he didn't see in himself. He'd say his 9-year-old daughter told him to be brave. And when they asked what the secret was, the real secret, the thing that couldn't be trained or taught or bought, he'd say it was simple. Show up. Every time. Even when you're scared. Even when you're broke. Even when the whole world says you don't belong. Show up for the people who need you. Show up for yourself. And never, ever walk past someone on a cold sidewalk who's asking for help. Catherine, when asked, would say it differently. She'd say Marcus Turner was the finest man she'd ever met. Not the most trained, not the most credentialed, the finest. Because character isn't the line on a resume. Character is what you do when you have a 9-year-old daughter behind you and a stranger bleeding in front of you, and every reason in the world to keep walking.
And Zoe, older now, applying to MIT's astrophysics program with a personal essay about a father who built bridges and then learned to protect people, because both of those things are about making sure nobody falls. Zoe would say the simplest thing of all. My dad didn't help Catherine Ashford because she was a CEO. He helped her because she was alone and scared on a frozen sidewalk. That she turned out to be someone who could change our lives was just the universe paying attention. Because the universe always pays attention when a good man does the right thing. The robbery lasted 8 seconds. The transformation it ignited lasted the rest of their lives. And it all started because a man with $26.33 in his pocket decided that a stranger's life was worth more than his own safety. That man was Marcus Turner, and he never walked past anyone again.